On my journey to read every Robin Hood book there is imaginable and to find the best, I run across this one, Robin Hood, The First Arrow by David Pilling. So I'm going to give the short summary of my review, the less spoilery part, and then I'm going to go by detail as I was reading the book and the notes I've taken. And it's short, easy read, and the writing is quite pleasing. It's as it's intended to be. It's an origin story, and it's based on real world facts that we know. I want to say facts because even though it's still a legend, he kind of took what we have, the ballads and whatnot, and put them into a narrative. It does a good deal of describing what it's like to be around people who are more criminal than you, and the sheer grittiness of living out in the wild, and just kind of being thrown into the wilderness and having to survive. And I feel like people often forget this part when they romanticize the Robin Hood stories. And this one doesn't go into as much detail about the harshness of it as the other ones do, but it's still there. Poor Robert. Yeah, it's not Robin, it's Robert. And apparently Robin is like a pseudonym to the name Robert, which I didn't know. He's kind of forced to get involved with these criminal and lawless people, and he quickly has to discover what it takes to earn his freedom. And it's always going to be hard for me, no matter what book I read about it, because I have this special image in my mind of what Robin Hood is supposed to be. Which members are in the gang, what events take place, and each stepping stone that's supposed to be there. And I think it's because, I too romanticize the legend. And I want more badly to read the legend than I do want to read the facts. If that's the case, I could just pick up one of those biography or those educational books about it and read that. So when it diverts a little bit from what I expect, it becomes more of a challenge for me to accept it. Like, they change Marion to Matilda. It's just, it doesn't have that same ring to it when you speak those kind of names. That makes it less romantic. Like Romeo and Juliet, those are romance sounding names. Robin and Marion, those are pleasant names. And then you change it to Robert and Matilda. I don't know. And the characters, Tuck is always, I love Tuck. He's great. Of course, classic Guy is there. But this whole thing, he has an obsession with slaying Robert. And he's a bit unlikable at times. Robert, I mean. He taunts people who are being nice to him for no reason out of the blue. He gets angry with people who are trying to help. And he randomly thinks about mutiny in a group that he's only just joined. Why is he never content? I like that the basic core is there, that he wants to help the common folk and those who can't help themselves against power. I just prefer my Robin Hood stories to be more about legend and less about the facts. But at the same time, I really do want to read the sequel because I feel like now that the origin story is out of the way, the real story can happen. So that was the non-spoiler review. Now I'm going to get into the actual details of the book. When it starts, he's out hunting in the forest that everyone knows is illegal to poach in. And that's a common theme. You can't hunt in the king's forest. But this time, he's hunting in the woods, and he has these thoughts like, oh, bugger the king. It's my right to do it, too. I can hunt here. And the sheriff is Eustace de Loudham. Loudham? We've been through this. You know how it's going. It's Eustace. Like, that's another name. We got Eustace, Matilda, Robert. Just go with it. So while Robert's out poaching, the sheriff is just doing his duty. He's got his guards, skis with him, and he's on this manor, and he's doing one of his random audits because he can. It's his job. And the people in the manor is being kind of grouchy about it because they know that they've been breaking the law and they don't want them to search. And Robert, I keep wanting to call him Robin, but his name is fucking Robert. Robert randomly takes it upon himself to shoot one of the guards in the eye. And guess who that is? Yeah, Guy of Gisborne. The funny part is he has no idea why he did it. He was just overcome with this want to do it. And he did it. So, and then he's like, oh, why the fuck did I do that? So then he's like, oh shit, I did that. And then he runs, he flees through the woods, okay? And he's not like a noble in this one, which is one of my favorite parts to his story, is that he's a noble. Kind of like Batman. He's rich, but he has the power to do something against the other rich. But in this story, they take that away from him. He actually has a lord. His lord is William of Percy at Linton. Locksley is mentioned, but Linton is where he's based at in this one. But he realizes, he knows the woods better than they do. Even though he's not supposed to be in that one particular forest, He knows that the winter ground is going to make it a lot harder for them to track him, and he listens for sound. And they never bothered to chase after him. They're just like, oh shit, we better go fix ourselves and we'll be back. And this whole time, Robert's like freaking out. He's like, oh my god, they're going to catch me, they're going to hang me, they're going to catch me. And the guards don't give a shit. They don't, I mean, they're like, yeah, that was kind of annoying, but we got other stuff to do. And he's freaking out. And then the whole time he runs, and he's scared to even go back home because he thinks that they're just going to come after him, catch him, and hang him. But the thing is, they never even saw who did it. They saw it was some random rando in the forest, but they didn't get a look at his face. Robert's like, oh, maybe I can go to another town and beg and hope that they'll host a criminal there. But it's like, dude, they don't know you're a criminal. Don't tell them what you did, and they won't even know. So I feel like he made that all in. If he just went home and acted casual and normal, when they come asking and knocking, they're not going to know if he just acted like everyone else. So instead of going home, he walks 8 miles in another direction. What? So when the sheriff actually had to go into one of the peasant towns to bring Guy to a healer, he was disgusted by how they mingle with animals and humans. He looks down on them. It was kind of telling on how differently that they look down on the poor. Like, they forget who makes the food that they eat and where they get it from, who works to make all the stuff that they use. So Matilda is actually Robin's betrothed already. That's just how it is. He's already betrothed to her, and they're a thing. Tuck actually lives in a cave in the middle of the forest, and he provides a small-time sanctuary to criminals and passerbys. So Robert takes upon himself to hide there. It's a good idea. And then while he's there, there's another criminal already hiding out, Hob. But Robert was actually already known as a small-time criminal. Like, before this, he actually did, like, small assault and small robbery. So he was already on the slippery slide to where he was. So it's not too far-fetched that he would randomly shoot somebody. And this douche in the cave actually intimidates Robert to go out and hunt with him. At this point, it's kind of a strange situation because Robert doesn't really have a choice. Now that he's taken this slippery slope and burned his bridges, he has no choice but to cling to anybody who will accept him. In a position like this is how you get caught up with people who are no good. And sometimes when you get into these situations, it's hard to get out of. So it turned out that Hob wants him to be part of this highway robbery. And they wait for a long, boring time. And it's not as romantic as people make it out to be. They see the shows and the movies, and you're like, oh, they're just going to randomly go in excitement all the time. Like, no. It's kind of like police things. Like, there's hours of just sitting there and doing nothing in the woods while you wait on somebody to pass by. And it turns out the only people who come through are a couple of priests. And this naturally makes Robert a little bit uncomfortable. He doesn't want to kill 2 random priests. But Hob was dead set that they're going to kill whoever came on this path. And he doesn't really have a choice. Because like I said, once you get caught up in this, you have to do it. Robert kind of messes up on purpose so he doesn't have to kill them. But then Hob ends up having to kill them, like right in front of Robert, and he can't do anything about it. And he feels horrible about it because he's witnessed a murder and he's an active accomplice now. That's far-fetched from the legend that we know him as. I like that spin on it. And it's a good reminder that the people he hangs around with are actual criminals. And who you're subjected to has an impact on your reputation. And Tuck is awesome. I'm going to say that again because he can tell that Robert's kind of conflicted and he has this dark spot on his soul, as you would say. And he has this sensation that Robert wants to kill Hob and be done with him so he doesn't make them do anything else that they don't want to do. And Tuck stops him from that. He says, don't let him drag you down too because you're going to be on the same level as he is. Back to the Batman thing. And I hate how the names, let's go back to the names. Hob and Hode are too similar because they call it Robert Hode is his name and they call him Hob. So we have Hod and Hob and Hob and Hode. You see what I'm getting at? It's difficult to keep up with. They could have named him anything. Did they have to go with Hob that's so close to Hode? The cave is well known to everybody. That's how criminals find it, okay? So Guy comes searching for them and they end up having to flee. They've panicked. They run through the woods and they end up having to jump into a river. And at the last moment, Robert's instincts overcome him and he kills Hob with a rock before he jumps into the river. And he leaves him behind so Guy can take him while he flees. He doesn't even know if he's dead or not, which newsflash he is because Guy takes his head. But what the hell was that about? I don't know if it was trying to show him as an opportunist or what, because that comes up again later. So Tuck finds him in the forest again, and then Robert has this overwhelming sensation that or let's say gratitude towards the gods, because he thinks for some reason they're helping him. And meanwhile, the sheriff doesn't really care about a small-time criminal thing like Robert. Guy's not dead, but Guy has this obsession to find Robert since he's taken his eye. His only reason the sheriff agrees is because his wife is so naggy about it. Something that bothers me is Robert and Tuck are on their way to another town, and they get some help from some priests that are traveling by. And I know that they try to put this twist on it because the priests are well off. Like, they have rings and plenty of food because they're fat, they're overweight. So Robert has this dislikable attitude towards them, that they're charitable, that people give to the churches all the time, and the churches rarely give back. But they're well fed, they talk about being pious and whatnot, but they hardly go without. But while he's on the back of a horse, Robert taunts this guy for being overweight. And it clearly makes the guy uncomfortable, and the whole way there, he taunts him with these little comments, and he's giddy about it. And I feel like that's a bit cruel for our hero, as you should say, because this guy is he's helping you. You might not like him, but do you need to just say that? It feels like bullying and a bit cruel to me. And I know it's supposed to make Robert look cheeky because Robin Hood's supposed to be this, charismatic, clever, witty guy. But so far, all of his remarks have just been bullying. And meanwhile, Guy's on this obsessive hunt for Robert. And he actually goes to his uncle's place. And he went to talk to him. And somehow he ends up accidentally killing him. So that's pretty bad because he snuck off to do it on his own. The sheriff told him to leave it alone. He's a small-time criminal who gives a shit. But Guy's like, I give a shit. So he went by himself to go interrogate his uncle and ends up accidentally killing him. And now he's got a murder charge on his head. So he crawls back to the sheriff. The sheriff realizes that, okay, he can actually use him to hunt Robert, because either way, if he fails, he'll die, and if he can just hang him now. So if he's going to die either way, then he might as well get the most use out of him. That part I can understand. And while Robert is traveling with Tuck, a group of robbers actually jump out on the road and try to hijack them. What's interesting to note here is that these gangs that rob people already exist. So it's not like he come up with this idea of starting a gang and a whole revolution joined him. It was more like this has been going on forever, and he climbs up in the ranks. And unwisely, for some reason, Robert shit talks this gang that has threatened to kill him and everyone he's with. They clearly outnumber him, and he's already admitted that he's not the best fighter. He's a good shot with a bow, but he's not a great fighter. For him shit-talking them, they like that, and they accept him quite easily. Robert liked them because they were honest thieves. I don't know if that makes it any better or not, honestly. But he was just thinking about how he liked them because they were honest thieves, and he disliked the priests that were being robbed because they were dishonest thieves. And yeah, I get that, but at the same time, these are criminals. And this is inconveniencing you. We have this theme of greed. Greed makes people crazy. Even the outlaws, they accept Robert and Tuck and they take him back. They pay off a rich guy who actually houses them. And you see a lot of this, that a lot of greed and coin controls so much of our economy, more than actual trade. Even Gisborne said he was going mad because he constantly is losing money. He doesn't know how to take care of his land and his property and his people, and he's constantly losing money, so he's going crazy. And I feel like that plays into his obsession. He just wants a distraction. So again, Guy goes out into the woods, and he's hunting down Robert, and for some reason, despite any of the opportunities where he could be at, he seems to know exactly where Robert is hiding. But while he's dealing with going there, Robert is with the gang, and he's fitting in quite nicely, except he has these ideas that he keeps bringing up to the leader, Gilbert. Yes, and Gilbert is quite similar to Guy, so we have Gilbert and Guy. Anyway, Robert is trying to convince Gilbert to give some of their take to the poor, which seems to come out of nowhere in the story, but it's part of his character, so you have to allow it. All right. Gilbert says kind of shut the hell up and mind your own business. They practically warn him to watch his step. But at the same time, I'd say it's, if you still with us and you get your cut, it's your money. You do what you want with it. Like, it's cool if you want to give to people, but don't try to make other people give to people too. You know what I'm saying? So Guy actually calls him out with a message to one of the other outlaws. It impresses everybody by being like, yeah, I'm going to go fight him. And then he, on his way to fight Guy, he realizes, oh shit, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to fight a knight. I'm not trained. And you see this impulsiveness again. He ends up killing Guy. He goes ham on him. He gets angry and he slashes like over his body and he just beheads him. And yeah, so that happens. He actually takes his head back to the group and they cheer him as a hero. And now he's a threat. They think he's going to take Gilbert's place, who's getting old and less idealistic. So that's kind of a new theme to the Robin Hood story, is the dissonance in the group. And he's not the leader of it. He's just part of it. And there's this dissonance between him and the other leader. And also this idea that there are several groups of bandits in the forest, not just this one that controls the whole forest. And meanwhile, we have a side note about this other character, a knight, Fultz, about not wanting to fight in France, because it's France. I don't really hate France. I know that keeps coming up and looking that way. I don't hate France. So, and he goes home kind of defeated. To get back at him, the king or the prince, whatever, orders him to pay a possible sum just to get back at him for not wanting to follow his orders. And he's accosted by Robert and his small-time gang, who off-screen has apparently broken off and started his own band of bandits, a couple of zealots, about 20 people or so. So they come up with this huge, charismatic kind of way, performative, let's just say that. They put on this show where they invite him back to their, like, they came off as charming and friendly bandits and they bring him back. The whole time he's trying to tell them, hey, I don't have any money, I'm broke. They just kind of ignore that and they feed him and they have a merry old time. And then afterwards, they're like, okay, we fed you, so now you have to pay for all this stuff. Like, it was the trap they were sprung in. And he finally has to tell them, like, look, I told you guys I don't have any money. And they're like, wait, what? You're serious? It's like, dude, this big elaborate trap was a fail. I envy Robert's ability to be civil, but they should have discovered if he had any money worth taking before they set up this huge scheme and went through with it. But they feel bad for him. And Robert, gives him the money that he needs with a promise of a favor. And this kind of scares the sheriff later on because they start to realize that this is how he's gaining favor with the nobles. And now they have power, and this is what scares them. So then later on, Gilbert, the old gang leader, goes to the sheriff with this ploy of turning himself in. But in trade, he wants them to take care of Robert because now he's pissed off that Robert has taken some of his group members. He's undermining him. The forest isn't his anymore. So he actually leads them to Robert's place with the sheriff, and they attack it. And Robert feels horrible about this because a lot of them die, and they end up having to flee big time. So they run off to the previous guy, the one that they just paid his debt off, Fultz, and he accepts them in and hides them there behind the castle walls. And the sheriff cannot get to it because it's another guy's property. Even though Fultz knows that this pretty much damns him, they manage to pick up Little John here, who is not like you normally think. He's a big guy, yeah, but he's an archer. He's actually wielding a crossbow, and he's quite clever when he talks. So I like this rendition, even though it's not how I pictured him. And Gilbert ends up dying by trying to get to Robert, and the sheriff just leaves. He's like, oh well, that didn't work. And in another bad choice, Robert goes back to the old camp and tries, just to pick through the remnants of what's there. And they see all the old bodies and the ones that they've hung. It doesn't seem very smart to go back because realistically, even today at crime scenes, sometimes they leave police hanging around just to keep people away. And I feel like still then they would leave guards just to watch the place in case anybody tried to come back, like they literally just did. But it passes. Robert gives the people who are left, he has this new attitude about things. He feels more responsible, that his actions are more responsible. And but he gives them the choice. He's like, I'm going to Sherwood Forest because it's a good idea, and if y'all want to leave, you can leave. If you want to follow me, that's where I'm going. And he thinks they don't want to follow him anymore because he fled the scene, even though realistically that's probably what saved everyone's life. It was all you can do. For some reason, that's all he feels bad about. And in France, his reputation starts going up. Yeah, even in France, the king actually gets word that he's becoming a menace and a threat to society. And meanwhile, Robert he and his gang are in the Sherwood Forest, and they have this eerie sensation that the forest is haunted. A lot of people stay away from it. We're getting back to the lore now, and he can't sleep because he has this overwhelming guilt, and he feels guilty about all the people that died for him. And he argues with his gang, and he sounds really like a douchebag here. Like, he doesn't even listen to advice, he just shuts it down from the start. They tell him it's not a good idea to go show yourself in public, but he wants to go to the church and beg for forgiveness. So he only wants to appease his own guilt. And they tell him that's not a good idea because there's too many guards, there's too many people. And he's like, I don't care, I'm going. And he actually goes. He goes to Nottingham, I believe it is, and he notices how many people there are, yeah, but he makes it to the church and he prays and he feels a lot better. And there's this funny moment where he's looking and he's like looking at the cross and he's like, I wonder how much that's worth. And he's like, oh shit, who am I now to think that? Don't think that. And funny enough, while he's in there, one of the priests that he robbed with Hob in the beginning of the story had gotten away, and he remembers his face as being one of the ones who robbed them. So, and immediately the guards are on him. And that to me is kind of hilarious karma, how that came all the way back around from the beginning. That's really good. And they pretty much overwhelm him, and the book ends right there. And so clearly enough, the sequel is going to pick up with him being in the dungeon, and the gang is probably going to break him out. So the book is as it's intended to be, an origin story. Though I don't know how I feel about this particular origin. I like the common one where he's a noble growing up and then he makes a sacrifice and then it gets him outlawed, but it earns people's respect that he's chosen to give up something. Because I feel like choosing to do it rather than, being forced to it has a little bit more weight to it and it's more respectable. We are missing a couple of my favorite tales, like the golden arrow, the splitting arrow. I mean, even when he fights, he uses a stave more than a bow in this book, and a dagger, even though it's mentioned that he shoots. So I think the book was okay. It's definitely not my favorite Robin Hood ones, but the writing was pleasant, and it's a good casual read if you just want to read a Robin Hood book. And especially, I feel like those who want to be more grounded in realistic settings. Not realistic like possible, but realistic as in following the ballads and the legends. But me, I prefer the more romanticized versions. Anyway, that's it for this Robin Hood version. I'll see you later.